Good morning, Skallywags, and welcome to another episode in a series of Enigmatic events. I'm Shfu.
I'm AJ. Wendy Eaton was a happy, outgoing 15-year-old girl. She was a 10th grader from Pencrest High School, and by all accounts, she was a model student. She enjoyed the outdoors, she liked music, she played the piano and the guitar, she was also part of the church choir, and she was very enthusiastic about religion, active in her church and all of the groups that they had available for her. On May 17th, 1975, just 1 week before her 16th birthday, she vanished without a trace.
Wendy grew up in the small town of Media, Pennsylvania, the youngest child of Roland and Jean Eaton. She had an older brother and an older sister who were both away at college, no longer living in the home. The family had chosen to live in the small town of Media because it was a safe place to bring up children. Nothing bad had ever happened there until Wendy's disappearance.
Since both of her older siblings had moved out, neighbors and friends said that the family dynamic changed, and it was very much like Wendy was an only child. She was very close to her parents, especially her mother, and her mother describes her as a bit of an idealist. Her favorite TV show was The Waltons because she loved their purity of faith that they had.
Even though she was only a week away from turning 16, Wendy was described as looking more like a 12-year-old. She was only 4'10" and only weighed about 90 pounds. Her friends, her classmates, and even her parents said that she really never showed any kind of interest in dating. In fact, they pretty much all said that, kind of like we mentioned, that Wendy being so religious, all of her free time was spent with various church activities.
Even the night of her disappearance, she had a church activity. She was supposed to perform with the church choir, but unfortunately, she didn't make that performance. Wendy was last seen by a classmate at around 3:15, 3 blocks away from her house at the intersection of Indian Lane and Media Station Road. Other witnesses who were driving by corroborated this statement, but after that intersection, she's just never seen again.
So where could Wendy have gone? Let's take a look at a few of the events that took place that day leading up to Wendy's disappearance. It was a beautiful, warm Saturday morning with temperatures in the mid-70s. In fact, that morning, Wendy had been sunbathing on the roof just outside of her room. Being that it was such a lovely day, Wendy's parents had decided to go play a few rounds of golf. Before heading out, they asked if Wendy wanted to join them, but she declined, saying that she had plans to go to the mall to pick up a birthday present for her brother. So as they drove away, Wendy's parents waved goodbye and told her they loved her, and that would be the last time they saw Wendy, still sunbathing there on the roof.
A short time after her parents left, Wendy climbed back through her window, got dressed, and headed to the mall. Her parents arrived home at 5:30 that evening, and they were actually surprised that Wendy wasn't there. They thought she'd be there getting ready for her concert, and there wasn't any notes or anything like that. Apparently, if she changed plans, it was very commonplace for her to leave a note. They just assumed that their daughter left the mall, it was getting late, and instead of coming home, she just walked straight from the mall to the church.
While at the time, Joan and Roland weren't, too concerned, they did feel a little bit uneasy at all of this. So Roland decided to jump back in the car and make the 1.5-mile journey over to the church to see if she was there. Once he arrived, he went inside and saw several of her friends there, so he's asking around. But not only had none of them seen her, they in fact also were rather surprised that she wasn't there. Roland, trying to kind of keep his composure and trying not to get too panicked, decided to head back to the house. He kind of desperately hoped to himself that he would arrive back to find Wendy there at the house with some sort of excuse as to why she was late. Unfortunately, that did not happen.
When he got back to the house, her parents went and checked her room. Now, her bed wasn't made, but they said that wasn't unusual. Her bathing suit was crumpled on the floor as well, and there was a John Denver record still on the record player. Other than that, her room was clean and tidy, and I guess that was very typical of her room and the way she kept it. It was noted that her purse was there, but they said that since she was walking to the mall, a lot of the time she would put her money in her pockets instead of carrying her purse with her. So that wasn't unusual either. At this point, Wendy's parents did what any parent would do, and that would be call around. They called all of her friends trying to see if anyone had seen her. One of her friends did say that they talked to her earlier in the afternoon, that at that time, Wendy said she was going to walk to the mall to buy her brother a present, which was exactly what she told her parents she was going to do. At this point, fearing the worst, they actually called the police in to report that their daughter was missing.
After speaking with her parents, police agreed that Wendy did not fit the typical profile of a runaway. They began their search by going door to door, asking neighbors if they had seen her at any point during that day. There were 3 of the neighbors that all said that they had seen Wendy heading in the direction of the mall somewhere around 3 o'clock. There was one neighbor who even gave a rather interesting set of events. He said that he was on his way home from work when he saw her walking around 3:05 again in the direction of the mall. Once he arrived home, he had a couple of things to do and then he had to leave out again pretty quickly. But when he passed that same area at around 3:15, 3:17, somewhere in that ballpark, there was no sign of Wendy whatsoever.
One of Wendy's classmates said that they seen her walking toward the mall at around 3:10 to 3:15. He said he saw her standing at the intersection of Indian Lane and Media Station Road. This is the last confirmed sighting of Wendy before she went missing, which puts her missing exactly between 3:10 and 3:17. That's a very short window.
Right.
Because they had a missing girl, the police actually brought in dogs to trace her. They started in her room and they actually had the dog trace her scent. And when they got to Indian Lane and Media Station intersection, the scent went dead. The dog actually sat down and didn't go any further, meaning that was the last place he picked up any signs of Wendy.
Detectives concluded that she must have been picked up by someone at this intersection, but there was unfortunately no way to determine what direction they had traveled from that point. In fact, detectives weren't even really sure that a crime had been committed. There was no evidence at that intersection to say that she had been taken against her will, so there was no crime scene to investigate. There was no evidence of a roadside struggle. There was no witness to see what had happened. No one had heard screams. And Wendy's family and friends all confirmed that there's no way she would have gotten into a vehicle with a stranger. So if she had gotten into a vehicle at that intersection, it must have been someone that she already knew.
Even though they had no evidence of foul play, the police did investigate and interview the people in her life. Classmates, friends, people from her Girl Scout troop, and of course the people from all of the church activities, which she was very, very involved with. However, no one had any idea of what happened to Wendy. Police actually determined that it might be someone she met outside of her traditional circle of friends.
Then the next day, police received a rather interesting tip. There was an employee at a runaway hotline in Chicago. They said they had received a call the day before from a girl saying that she was 15 years old from the media area, who claimed that she was running away from home. But none of her friends could really ever say that Wendy had given any kind of indication that she was unhappy or thinking of running away. And apparently, as far as the hotline was concerned, there weren't any other details given before the caller hung up. But since Wendy was the only person from that area who had gone missing, and she also fit the description that the caller gave, they took this as a pretty important piece of information. However, police were unable to determine if this call was legitimate, if it had been made by Wendy or maybe someone who had harmed Wendy and was pretending to be her. And unfortunately, there weren't any other calls that came about this particular case anytime after that.
Given the unusual circumstances of Wendy's disappearance, the fact that they didn't find a struggle or anything, they actually started looking into the possibility that she ran away. They were looking at any incidents that may have caused her to want to leave home. When they were investigating, they only found one incident that they noted, and that was a few weeks earlier. She had asked to go to a church camp in Colorado, and her parents said no. Her parents said she was disappointed. Her friends said she was disappointed, but none of them said that they thought she was so disappointed that she would run away from home. When the camp actually started up a few months after her disappearance, a few of the investigators did go out there and they investigated, and there's no proof or any suggestions that Wendy showed up there, that Wendy was attending there at all. So if that was the reason for her running away, you would think that she would go there. As months passed, Roland, Wendy's father, actually tried to get the FBI involved in the case, but as there was no clear abduction, they couldn't. This had the Eatons actually circulating a petition from friends and family and local people trying to get the FBI involved. But this too proved fruitless. The FBI issued a statement that said that even though they felt bad for the family, because of the lack of evidence of an abduction, they just could not get involved in this case.
So once it became clear that the FBI was not going to be any kind of help, Roland, Wendy's father, he decided to kind of take matters into his own hands. With the help of some of his co-workers, he managed to raise $5,000 that they could offer as a reward for any information leading to Wendy's recovery. The family also hired an ex-FBI investigator to kind of help out with their search. The Eaton family was very determined. They left absolutely no stone unturned in their investigation. They made hundreds of phone calls, and anything that looked even remotely promising, they would travel to that area to look into matters themselves. They called every homeless shelter, every runaway shelter in the entire United States, as given that they could find a phone number for them. They called every single one of them. They passed out missing persons posters everywhere they went, but despite every single effort, every tip that they did receive just led to another dead end.
Then the following January 7th. So this is right after Christmas, and it's their first Christmas without Wendy. They get a phone call, and Roland actually takes the phone call, and there's a man on the other end who says that he has information about Wendy and where she is. With one little thing. He wants $10,000 to give Roland this information. As you said earlier, they did gather together $5,000, but the family just didn't have $10,000. Right. So Roland actually did something brave. He asked the guy on the phone if he would take payments. He was like, "Can you take $5,000 now and I'll get the other $5,000." Unfortunately, when he did that, the caller hung up.
The next morning, the caller calls back. He accepted the offer, saying to take $5,000 in cash and leave it in 10s and 20s in Chester Park. Chester Park was in what was considered a pretty bad neighborhood, but it was only about 15 minutes away from the Eatons' home. The man told Roland to put the money in the trash can at Chester Park before 3:30 and then hung up again. Roland called the police and they set up a stakeout.
A 17-year-old boy was arrested when he arrived at the park to get the money. He actually spilled the beans. He said, "I'm not the only one," and an 18-year-old named Buck Jones and an unnamed 15-year-old were also arrested for getting this money. They weren't arrested for anything to do with Wendy. They were arrested for extortion and criminal conspiracy. They just wanted the money.
Obviously, that was a pretty big blow to the Eaton family, but they did receive a little bit of optimism as police started receiving tips all the way through January of 1976. And this new line of tips actually said that Wendy had maybe joined a traveling religious group.
A cult.
That was traveling throughout Pennsylvania.
I mean, it might not be, but you know.
Right. We'll touch on that. The group called themselves the Forever Family. It was a fundamentalist Christian group that had been founded in Allentown, Pennsylvania in 1971. Stuart Trail, who had founded this group, had actually been kicked out of the Pentecostal church and decided to start his own church, believing that he was the only one who could truly understand the Word of God.
A cult.
We'll touch on that. Many young teenagers would be attracted to this group, kind of attracted to the communal lifestyle that they held.
A cult.
Go ahead, yeah.
A cult.
We'll touch on that. They claimed that they were simply a church, and in fact, not a cult. I can't imagine why accusations of being a cult would have ever come up in this situation, but they swear that they're not one.
Isn't that what cults say? Sorry.
Yeah.
They actually say that they're against all drug use, and they encourage all their members to give $10 a month to charity.
At least it's to charity. So
it is to charity and no drugs.
yeah, it's not hand over all of your worldly possessions and all of your funds to us.
I don't know. All of the members wore pins that said, "Get smart, get saved."
Not a cult.
They would look for new members among the homeless and runaways.
Not a cult.
News reports, however, did state that it was, in fact,
a cult.
The claims were that the Forever family was actually preying on runaways and the homeless, especially young teenage runaways.
But they said they weren't a cult.
You know, people lie.
My world is shattered.
In these reports, it actually stated that the founder encouraged and actually kind of demanded that all members of his not cult break away from anyone not affiliated with his not cult, break ties with family and friends. This report said there was rumors that there were over 100 runaways and young people who were found on the streets that the church was hiding. Still,
not a cult. By January of 1976, various members of this not a cult were arrested for one reason or another. Everything from disturbing the peace, to blocking roadways, to harassment and threats. During this time period, police actually got a number of calls from people in the Scranton area who called the police to report that Wendy had been seen selling candy door to door.
It would have been funnier if she was selling paper.
Right?
Police actually went to a former member of Forever family and they showed a picture of Wendy, and this woman said she recognized her, that she had seen her and met her at a gathering of the family, Forever family, not a cult, in the town of the King of Persia. She said that she knew her as Wheezy. Well, we're moving on now. And not Wendy.
Obviously, investigators, they were cautiously optimistic with this. Eventually, they were even able to track down the girl that had been seen selling the candy.
Wheezy.
Wheezy.
Well, we're moving on now.
And while she looked like she could have been Wendy's sister, or maybe even a twin for that matter, it was not Wendy.
I feel like that's weird.
That is very, very weird. See, and what we don't know is how they were able to determine that it wasn't her. Did they just go to her and the girl's like, no, I'm not Wendy?
It didn't
Even
say.
though I'm the spitting image of her, my name is the same as it was when I was a teenager, you know, whatever. But
yeah,
no, but we don't know.
It just said that they determined it was not her. And although the Forever family ended up being a dead end or determined not to be her, it did give her parents a little bit of a new direction to go in. They had a small piece of hope. What if Wendy, who we have previously said was very religious, had joined a cult? It's the 70s. They were everywhere. It was certainly a better option, alternative, especially in a parent's mind, than her being kidnapped and maybe traumatized or murdered. I mean, I would prefer a cult. This is where the Eatons' determination that you called it earlier really took effect. They actually started focusing on various cults around the country. They wrote letters to cult leaders. They wrote letters to ex-cult members, all in the hopes of finding their daughter.
One of these cults that they looked into was Sun Moon's Unification Church, and that's a tongue twister in and of itself. They even went as far as to have a dentist look into Wendy's dental records and compare them with several unidentified bodies at Jonestown. But with all of their efforts, nothing brought the family any closer to finding Wendy. By 1983, the family ended up going to court to declare Wendy officially dead. But even though she was declared dead, that does not mean that the investigation stopped.
Over the years, police have received thousands of leads and potential tips on Wendy Eaton. One of them was that she got involved with a motorcycle club, which doesn't quite sound like the Wendy Eaton that we've been talking about.
Hard left turn.
Yeah, but this motorcycle club was in the area, and it is actually responsible for the deaths of at least 5 women. At the time that Wendy went missing, there were actually several towns within the county that she lived in, Delaware County, that were dealing with their own missing women. In total, 6 women between the ages of middle teenage to early 20s were missing in the area. 5 of these missing women were eventually found, or at least their bodies were found, in the Tinicum area.
So that led police to at least consider the fact that there may have been a serial killer in the area. But it was also determined that all of these women had known each other prior to
their deaths,
and that they also had at least some loose affiliation with the motorcycle gang called the Warlocks. They determined that there were members of the motorcycle gang that were actually responsible for the death of the 5 women that were found. But even with all of that, there was nothing to show that Wendy was affiliated with any of them at all. So they did eventually rule out the possibility of the motorcycle gang, the serial killer. They ruled out Wendy being involved with them in any way, shape, or form.
Which I get.
Definitely.
I don't see that connecting.
Right.
Or to motorcycle gang.
But it just goes to show you just how far they were willing to stretch
went.
this investigation to try to find anything to bring her home.
Yeah. Police continued to track down, like we said, all the tips that they got about Wendy. They really wanted to bring answers to Wendy's parents, who were on their own as well, tracking down any information from cults to, motorcycle gangs, to comparing dental records of those at Jonestown. Unfortunately, the one thing that police could never do was give Wendy's parents any answers.
And sadly, both Joan and Roland passed away, never finding any resolution whatsoever to their daughter's disappearance. Joan passing away in 1995 and Roland passing away in 2007.
It's now been 40 years since Wendy took a walk to the mall and hasn't been seen since. Given the amount of investigation that was done in this case and the years that has passed, we may never know what happened to 15-year-old Wendy Eaton.
Wendy Eaton, again, was 15 years old when she disappeared. She is a white female with brown hair and brown or hazel eyes. She was around 4'10" and weighed about 90 pounds at the time of her disappearance. She's left-handed, deaf in her right ear, and sometimes wore eyeglasses. If you have any information that might lead to Wendy's discovery, please call the Pennsylvania State Police at 610-459-4150.
That's the story of Wendy Eaton. What do you think? What do you think happened to her? What do you think? Where is she? Hopefully we can get some answers for this family. Let us know what you think in the comments below.
Be sure to follow us across all of our social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Feel free to stop in and just say hello or check out any of our previous videos.
And as long as you're here, be sure to like, share, subscribe. That's important. Hit that subscribe button. We do have new videos every day, Monday through Friday. A little something for everyone.
And most importantly, drop us a comment. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know your theories. But most importantly, let us know what you want to see next in a series of enigmatic events. Thanks for watching.